In this module we're going to be looking at the sound creating sections of Sylenth 1. As I said in the last module, Sylenth 1 uses subtractive synthesis to create sounds, which relies on an oscillator to generate waveforms like sine or square waves, each with their own distinctive sound based on how many harmonics are added to the fundamental frequency. So let's take a look and get started. Firstly, to set Sylenth 1 to its initialized state, allowing me to start building a sound from scratch, I need to go to the File menu and choose Init Preset. This gives me a single oscillator, Oscillator 1, in part A, without any filtering or modulation or anything. So now when I play a key on my keyboard, you can hear the sound is a single-voiced sawtooth waveform. The default waveform in Sylenth 1 is a sawtooth, which is probably one of the most common used waveforms in dance music due to the richness in harmonics. However, by clicking on the waveform display here and dragging up or down, you can choose from a sine, a sawtooth, a triangle, a square wave, and what they call a pulse. H-pulse is basically an asymmetrical square wave. Q-pulse, trisaw, which is a combination of both triangle and saw wave, and finally noise, which is essentially all frequencies at full level. Once you've selected your waveform, the first thing you need to select is the number of voices in the oscillator by clicking on this number here and dragging it up or down. Notice the difference between one voice and 8. The volume dial can be dragged up and down like this to change the level. Next to the volume button is a phase dial that allows you to adjust the phase of the waveform, providing the retrig button over here is enabled and highlighted. Next to the phase dial is the detune dial, which allows the different active voices drift apart from the center frequency. To the left of the waveform selector is a button INV, which inverts the waveform. This will change a sawtooth into a reverse sawtooth waveform, although that won't have a great effect until there are multiple oscillators running at the same time, where the effect will be cross-phase harmonics. There are 3 separate controls for pitch on each oscillator. The first is octave, the second is the note, and the third is the fine tune, which will raise or lower a note to any value between 2 semitones. To the right of the phase control is the detune dial, which controls the accuracy of the fundamental frequency of the waveform. To the right of this is the stereo dial, which allows the phase of the left and right signal outputs to be separated, which gives the effect of widening the stereo balance of the output signal. The last button worth mentioning within the oscillator panel is the retrig button. By having this highlighted, all voices are forced to start at the exact same location in the waveform shape each and every time it's triggered. It's worth noting here that if you change the phase dial when this is enabled, it changes the starting point for all voices accordingly. The final components in the oscillator module are possibly the most important in any sound design, and that's the ADSR, which stands for Attack, Decay, Sustain and Release. The attack controls the length of time it takes for the signal to reach full volume like this. The decay controls the length of time it takes for the signal to reach the sustain level, which is the final output gain level, so by bringing the sustain down and a medium decay, it'll sound like this. And then finally the release controls the length of time the signal takes to reach 0 from the sustain level. So by giving this signal a medium release, it'll sound like this. So to give an example of what I've gone through so far, let's reset the synth by initializing it via the menu system here, and then let's choose a saw wave on the first oscillator, which is its default waveform, but let's give it 4 voices. Now let's choose another saw wave in the second oscillator and give it another 4 voices, giving it quite a thick sound. Now let's set a short attack time and a small sustain level. Now by giving it a fairly short decay time, it gives that stabbing texture. Now by slightly detuning each oscillator, the richness of the sound really starts to develop. So from some simple synthesis techniques, we've built what's commonly known as the super saw, and by adding another oscillator from part B and dropping it an octave, and then lifting one of the oscillators by a few semitones, the musicality of the synth really comes to life. So hopefully that's given you a good understanding of the oscillators now. Have a play around with these sections before the next one, checking out the presets I've just been using or making your own, so you can get a good feel of how each section works and what sounds you can make. If you have any questions, then you can head to Producer Tech Forum. Next time I'm going to be checking out all the important filters, so I'll see you then.